be recording. So without further ado, welcome everyone. Let's get started. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce this session this evening with the wonderful Hannah Ensor, who I'm sure is going to be really insightful and talk about lots of things that we can all absolutely relate to. There will be time for questions at the end. Just pop them in the chat and we'll, whenever things occur to you, and we'll make sure there's lots of time for the questions at the end. But without further ado, over to Hannah.
Thank you very much. So welcome to Creating Understanding of Hidden Symptoms and Disabilities. First bit about me, for those of you who've not come across me before. So I have a degree in environmental health. I was then medically retired in my 20s due to hypermobility and POTS. I then founded Stickman Communications, which is a company that uses Stickman cartoons to communicate about and improve understanding of lots of disability-related needs and issues. I've volunteered with the HMSA for approaching 20 years now in almost every role imaginable, and I've worked on various projects with other charities as well. I was on the 16 and 17 power list for the 100 most influential people with disabilities in the UK, which I call the CRIP list. I'm also a contemporary dancer. So that's the basics about me. On to the interesting stuff. So things we'll be covering today are why communicating about hidden symptoms can be so difficult. Understanding that can give us a really good foundation for finding solutions. Secondly, identifying what to communicate, your one key point. And then thirdly, how to communicate that key point. And then we'll look at how words can be used, actions can be used, images and memes, and even the decision-making process itself. So why? Essentially, it boils down to a lack of psychic powers. Who has been in this kind of a scenario? You're doing a task and it's well within capacity, and that today, and it's like, oh yes, I can do this. This is really good. You're in the zone. Someone comes along and they're like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. Let me help. And it's like, oh, for goodness sake, back off and let me do this. Stop interfering. And then maybe the next day, you're doing exactly the same task, but your symptoms are completely different. And this time you are struggling. Your symptoms absolutely atrocious and really getting in the way. And in waltzes your loved one, and then they look at you and then they make themselves a cup of tea and wander off again. And it's like, excuse me? Do you not care that I'm falling apart? Why aren't you helping me? And it boils down to the lack of psychic powers. Because what happens is those symptoms that for us as people with disabilities are paralyzingly or overwhelmingly present in our life to the point we cannot ignore them, are actually completely hidden for the other person. They can't see them. So what they've actually done is learn from the first scenario, in this context, they don't want help because all they've seen is you doing a particular task. So they see you doing that task again and like, I remember I learned from last time they don't want help doing this. And they just don't realize that it's actually a completely different context because our symptom levels are so different. So that's why we need these strategies that externalize our internal experience. Now, another thing to be aware of is that the signals that different people understand vary hugely, like massively, and it doesn't correlate to how much they care. So, for example, I've got a friend who I see maybe a couple of times a month, and she can like look at me across a room and be like, you've reached the end of your tether, you really need to go lie down. and she can just tell that. However, I have a close family member who loves me dearly, cannot pick up on those little signals if I'm in that exactly the same state as in scenario 1, as it were. And this family member will come up to me and go, "Oh, do you want to go on a walk? Shall we go out and do stuff?" And I'm like, "Oh, no." And it's not lack of care, it's just she cannot pick up on those signals that the other person can pick up on. Another common issue is that the other person has no similar lived experience point of reference. So, for example, if I say fatigued, and I mean I'm struggling to coordinate my standing, so I'm really wobbly, I'm likely to drop things, I'm losing the ability to speak, I might choke if I try and eat things, it's going to take me 2 or 3 days to get back to my normal level of functioning, and that's what I mean by fatigue. The other person, the chances are, the closest they can do is really tired. And what happens if you're really tired and you push yourself? You're a bit grumpy, and that's all. And so it's not surprising that if that's the closest they've got, then it's not surprising that actually there's misunderstandings happen. It's also unrealistic to expect complete understanding of all aspects of my condition. Now, don't get me wrong, we all want and to some degree need complete understanding of ourselves and our conditions. But actually, expecting that is unrealistic. What is realistic is to say, okay, there's this one thing that I want you to understand today. And then tomorrow it'll be another thing. And over time, you build that complete understanding, but you get there by small steps. Now, the reason this is important is because if you have an unrealistic expectation, you experience repeated failure. If you have a realistic expectation, in the same situation with the same outcome, you experience frequent success. So what I mean by that is, if I'm like, I just want you to understand that sometimes I need to go down and lie down and this is a good thing, and that is understood, then that's a success. There's still like 20,000 other things they don't understand, but that one thing, we've achieved success in that understanding and we can build on that. Whereas if my aim had been complete understanding, that experience would have been a complete failure because they've only understood that one thing. So it actually makes a huge difference to our mental health by changing these expectations to just one step at a time. So on to the one key point. Essentially, this boils down to, what is the one thing I need them to understand? And this can take a bit of practice to work out and you get into the hang of. It's a skill. Usually this consists of what you want them to do or not do and why. Now, if you're, asking a stranger on the street to open a door for you, then you don't need to go into the why. The reason the why is important in this situation is because we're actually trying to create understanding of our condition. And that means we have to sometimes explain why we need the thing that we're asking for. Just a sentence, it doesn't have to be a long and detailed medical thing. And no hints. So this is things like, the washing up needs doing. Yes, the washing up does need doing. Doesn't get done though, because you haven't actually asked. And the temptation is, when you say, oh, the washing up needs doing, and it doesn't get done, is you then start to add in all these other factors. And I did it yesterday, and I've had to do it all this week. Yes. And then I also had to do this today, and if I do the washing up today, then I might not be able to do this other thing I need to do. And you kind of add all these other factors that are tangentially connected to the washing up in the hope that your point will get across. And I've done this myself. This is a very common social interaction. But actually, if you aren't getting what you need, the solution is to adapt how you communicate about it and not add more points. Adding more points kind of confuses the issue, actually. Whereas if you go, have I been really literal? No. Okay. Could you please do the washing up? Because I'm so wobbly, I'll fall over if I try. Or whatever your particular scenario is. And that way you communicate it clearly. But also be ready for a conversation about it, because the other person needs to feel that they have some control of this situation too. So things like, you can also ask in ways that validate their perspective or appreciate them. So I realise this is non-standard, what I'm asking you to do now, but could you please apply traction to my wrist because I think it's just slightly out, or whatever that might be. Or things like, I appreciate your offer or your suggestion when they've offered help that you don't want, but I'd like you to do this because reason. So you're always bringing it back to that one key point, what and why, preferably just a sentence in each. And also be prepared for a bit of negotiation. I can't do it now. Could I, I'll do it at 8 o'clock this evening. And you can, so that you're giving them that power. Because without them feeling they have a say in what they do and when, it can easily become quite heavy for them. And of course, we want people around us not to feel like we're loading them with stuff, and simply giving them that some decision space can achieve that. Another really important aspect of communicating is about can't. It's a really important thing for when you're expressing, you're trying to set boundaries, and it's often misunderstood. Now, I realise one of the reasons this can happen. So can't in a medical context is very literal. Can you walk? No, I can't because my leg is missing, paralysed, very broken, etc. So it's very much in a medical context, the word can't is a very literal and extreme word. Now, what happens in a social context is this is completely different. Are you going out for drinks tonight? No, I can't. Okay, some other time. And it's instantly understood that there are other factors that mean in this particular context, you're saying no for a decent reason. Nobody in that scenario panics that you've just said you can never ever go out for a drink ever again. It just doesn't happen because everybody knows this is a social context. Now, where we run into problems is where, as disabled people, our disabilities are part of our normal life. So we use the word can't in a social context because life is a social context. What often happens is the other person is like, oh, disability. And they start to listen in the medical context. And so you get these ridiculous conversations like I've had with a physio. Do these exercise. No, I can't. Well, you walked in here, so I know you can. It is physically possible for you to do this. Like, oh my word. This makes no sense. But of course, we've used a social can't. This can be I can't due to the severity of symptoms likely to be caused, the necessity of reserving energy to perform an essential task later, or needing to recover from a previous symptom-causing event. Because I don't know about you, but if I don't fully recover from something and then I start doing more symptom-causing stuff, my symptoms really escalate. So I've had to learn to avoid doing that wherever possible. So, some tips on communicating this without making people panic. Now, just as a quick aside, for me, being able to say can't has actually been hugely empowering and enabled me to do more, because I have loads of limitations that are completely different to average. I mean, I use a wheelchair. I work maybe 5 hours a week. No, I don't have the capacity to operate like an average person. I just don't. But if I accept that, then I can find all the things that I can do within my limits, instead of constantly trying to push myself to do things that actually I don't need to do. But what happens when we try saying, I can't do that, is people panic, assume we think we mean, I can't ever do that ever again. And they can't handle it. And everything goes pear-shaped. So when we communicate can't, there's a couple of things we can do. One is give the context very explicitly. I can't do that because of the symptom of this situation. If they're not quite getting that, you could give a specific example. If I do that, this is the consequence. If I talk when I'm standing up, my heart rate goes through the roof. And then you can also then give even more specific, down to, last time I tried talking when I was standing up, I fell into the wall because I lost the ability to stand. So this then gives a very clear context for your can't. But another way that I find really powerful is you give a positive way forward, because then they cannot do the panic that you think you can't ever do this thing ever again and that you've given up on life, which is essentially where they end up in their heads. This is why not being psychic is such a problem. Anyway, saying something like, I can't do it like that, I can do it like this. I can't go for a walk, I can go for a wheel. I'd love to do it. Let's see if we can find a way to make it doable. Now, this one's particularly good because it doesn't actually use the word can't, which the poor fragile person might not be able to cope with. And it gives that very clear way forward of, we need to talk so we can find something, a way to make it work. Or I can't, can we do this instead? All of those three give a way forward, which can be very effective at helping people to accept the can't. So on to some of the different ways we can communicate our one key point. If it's written words, it's really important that we match the document to the purpose. Now, in my experience, medical articles and websites are really only useful when they've been requested by the other person. So the other person already knows a bit about you, and they actively want to research it. Part of the reason for this is they are very generic. 25% of patients experience this. They've got no idea whether you do or not. So it can, if given at the wrong point, they can actually confuse people more, cause information overload, and make people switch off, rather than creating that understanding that we all want. Medical letters are great for official instances, not like other medical appointments, not so great for other stuff, usually. Having some emergency information in your bag for medical interactions can also be really useful. Just takes a bit of stress out of that situation, because you can hand it over instead of having to verbally explain, when the chances are you're at your least capable of explaining. Another really useful written element or option is personal letters or notes. So these are great for like the slightly deeper explanations of symptoms, or something communicating about an upcoming event and what you might need in order to make it workable, or why it's not going to be possible for you to do what may be being expected of you. So there is a Dear Loved One template on the HMSA website, but I think there is. And one of the advantages of this type of communication is that the author can sit and process what they've written edit it until they're happy with it. So it's a very accurate to what they want to say, but also the receiver gets to read and process it in their own space and time. So then when you have a conversation about it, you've both already done that initial processing, and you're on the same page to start from, which can make a big difference because for the other side of the conversation, the non-disabled person, hearing about your limitations can be emotionally challenging for them. So giving them the opportunity to do that processing and come to terms with it in their own space, not in my space, is actually can be a very helpful thing. Although it is likely to become less necessary as your disability and the way you are becomes more normal and more accepted. As in more normal for you, not more average normal. Another really useful thing, which I use a lot, are pre-written cards and flashcards. So for me, my fatigue affects my speech, and both sometimes it's the word finding, sometimes it's the actual ability to kind of get my mouth around words, and sometimes it's working out what on earth I want to say, not how to say it without offending everyone. And then, so you've got flashcards. These are some of the stickman ones, but there are different ones out there. So I use ones for the symptom specific. Here and now, this is the symptom. So the one key point is high pain levels or high fatigue levels, or I really can't talk right now. Whatever that one key point is, it's very clear, light-hearted. Just this is what things are. And it gets that point across without having to make it the topic of conversation. So it doesn't become a big deal. It just becomes a little fact that's useful to know. You can also use them for advance warning. By the way, this is part of how I function. You can use them to explain health conditions. So I often hand my cards over to any healthcare professional, but also if someone says, "So what is wrong with you?" And I'm like, I just don't have the energy to explain again. So out comes the flashcards, and also for coping strategies and pacing strategies, explaining them. Again, the flashcards can be really useful because they are effectively one key point on a card. Now, it's really important to be aware that different words can have different meanings to different people, especially words like pain and fatigue. So this leaflet looks at a few misunderstandings between patient and professional. I think it's really worth being aware of. The classic one is the doctor says, "How much pain are you in?" And as a patient, we're like, "Oh, I wouldn't class this sensation as pain." I did that for years with my physio because I called my pain, I only called it pain if it was like stabby, I think my ligament might tear if I push this much further. And they thought I meant my muscles are a bit achy, but it hadn't occurred to me to call muscle ache pain. So I've now learned that I need to be very explicit. So if I say I'm not in pain, I then say it feels like this, because that means that they can't misinterpret what I've said. So it often helps to give, if you're using a word that might be easily misunderstood, don't just use the word, give your own mini definition. Even things like "it's not too bad." We don't mean, "Oh, it's fine, I don't need any help." It's, well, it's within my normal and I'm not screaming. I can get on with life at this, but I wouldn't be mentioning it if I didn't actually want some help. So actually, that's the answer that we need to give. We did not just stop at "it's not too bad." So another really cool way of communicating can be through analogies. Very common one is the spoon theory. But you don't look sick.com. So this, in case, for those of you who haven't come across it before, this is a spoon is a unit of energy. So it becomes a way of talking about energy use through the day for someone who has an energy limiting condition. So say you can say, oh, well, I need 3 spoons for a shower and I've only got 2, or I'm out of spoons, that kind of comment. And you've communicated that you're extremely fatigued and need to back off, but you've done it in a way that's actually quite light-hearted and casual, so it can be quite effective at getting the message across. However, big word of caution, and you can have any code word that you want for these. So when I was working in an office before I retired, we had the vodka standard because my pot symptoms make me drunk, basically. So my colleagues would check in on me and be like, how drunk are you, Hannah? And if I reached 3 vodkas drunk, then it was time for me to go lie down and get my pot symptoms back under control. So it worked great because I was able to get really practical support in my office, very casual, totally accepted. It was great. We got a new colleague. This poor chap is sat at his desk as a normal 11 o'clock on a Monday morning. First day in the new office. Hannah, you had 2 vodkas already. Yeah, I am. You're going to have to be careful. And this guy was like, 11 a.m. and she's drunk in the office and no one cares. The rest of the office absolutely howled with laughter. And then all sort of piled in to explain to this chap that actually Hannah wasn't actually drunk. This was she has a condition that causes symptoms that make her look a bit like a drunk, and it's just a really cool code word way of making sure Hannah's okay. So these analogies and code words are great, but they only work with the in crowd. You have to make sure both sides of the conversation are fully up for the terminology, otherwise it won't work. If both people understand it, but one person really likes it and one person kind of hates it, then it's not going to work because it's not going to create that sense of connection that a mutually appreciated code word can create. Hope that made sense. My symptoms are starting to build in case you hadn't noticed. So another really effective way of communicating is by actions. And that old adage, actions speak louder than words, is really annoyingly true. If you explain something to someone and they see you do the opposite, what they have seen will always override what you explained, which is really annoying when it comes to hidden disability. So you get this scenario. People say to us, push yourself, you can do it. Like, but really, no, that's not a good idea. No buts, no buts. And they really push you. And maybe sometimes you do have to do the thing. And they're like, see, you did it. You can do more than you thought. And you're standing there going, oh, no, I can't go. And they merrily waltz off and you crumple in the corner. And maybe it takes you 3-4 days to recover. Or however long. The really depressing thing about this, sorry guys, is what this experience has taught the other person is I must push harder next time because they can do more than they think, which is really not a helpful attitude in our reality. First of all, understand this is going to happen sometimes. Don't beat yourself up if it happens. Just one of those things. Things you can actually try and do to improve, to reduce the number of times this happens. Firstly is try to stick to your no where possible. So use those communicating can't tips. So then your action of not doing it actually communicates that was a barrier, or that was a boundary that you have stated and that you need. But other really useful factors, especially when you're doing things that really do push you past your boundaries, but you need or want to do them anyway, if you can, allow some of your symptoms to show when relevant. So we don't go around, oh, woe is me, my symptoms are atrocious, because that's just not going to work. But you can let them drop slightly every now and then. So for example, in this talk, I'm actually kind of quite struggling with fatigue, but I'm doing it anyway, and it will have consequences. If I relax for a moment and yeah, okay, cannot do this presentation without the adrenaline, so the adrenaline's back. And I'm doing all the focus on doing this talk, and that way we're going to get, hopefully, a decent talk for you guys. And I will go to sleep afterwards. So, but just by doing that for what, 10 seconds, it's planted that seed. Okay, this person is actually struggling, even if they sound fine. So little things like that can actually be very effective. Another really effective thing is allowing the coping mechanisms to show as well. So looking at myself swaying slightly, that's helping me manage my pelvic pain. I sit celiac joints. And that comment is allowing my coping mechanism to show. It's not just letting people see what you do, but giving people a quick glimpse into your life of the why. Oh, just need to wiggle to manage my pain. And then you carry on with whatever you were doing. Or, oh, it's a bit noisy in here. Hang on while I put my earplugs in. Or just need to go and lie down. I'll be back when I've recharged a bit. Those comments, instead of sneaking off quietly to do your coping mechanism, so nobody sees. I mean, there are scenarios where we do that, but when we want someone to understand what we're doing and why and how really hard we are pushing ourselves to do this thing, then we have to let those little coping mechanisms show. So the old answering I'm fine to everything, if you want that person to understand you, you can't use the I'm fine mask when you're not, because it will prevent them from understanding. And the only way they'll understand is if you start giving them some literal answers. Here's a little glimpse of what I'm experiencing. Right, okay, you've had the glimpse, now we can carry on. Images and memes, or visuals and memes, can also be really useful. Word of caution with memes, it is really easy to information overload. If you send someone 30 memes in a day, the chances are they're not going to process them, so it won't actually achieve anything in terms of communication. If you send a meme without any context, then that's of much more limited use. Is it this is how I feel now? Or is it, this explains what happened last week? Or whatever. So actually just adding a little bit of context to a meme can be really effective, especially if it's just sort of one or two every now and then, rather than floods. Another way visuals are really useful is the old traffic light systems of how well you're coping. So you can get custom products like flippable wristbands or badges or anything like that, but even things as simple as a bad day t-shirt or piece of jewelry or piece of paper, whatever. Just to let the other person know, it just externalizes that internal experience. It creates that little bit of telepathy, as it were. Now, I do know someone who used the wristband to actually train her husband because he wasn't picking up any of the little signals. He just couldn't pick them up. So he'd get home from work and be like, why haven't you cooked dinner? And she's like, because I'm off my head with fatigue. And then another time we'd be like, oh, you shouldn't be cooking dinner. And it's like, no, it's fine because today's a day where it's well within capacity. So what she started wearing the wristband, and what she found is after about a year, he'd actually learn, okay, those little signals go with that colour wristband. Now I know what a bad day looks like. It's actually really effective. And of course, it's all done without any need for long lectures or confrontational conversations, because it's just, okay, it's a bad day. Message received. And that's it. Another really powerful and very effective communication tool or educational tool is involvement in the decision-making process itself. So externalizing that process. I mean, we all make these decisions of whether we can do something or not, but externalizing it. So we're talking about a process that would be something like this. Given current symptoms, will I be able to complete the task? Oh, I can complete the task. Will it cause a significant increase in symptoms? Yes. Ah, right. Can I make it more manageable? By splitting the task, using aid or adaptations, asking for help, having an exit strategy. If I know I can go home early, I'm much more likely to be able to attend an event. Then, do I have enough time to recharge? Okay, yeah, let's do this. Or no, best not. Okay for emergencies, but cannot do that push to that level routinely and maintain your health. That's something that tends to lead to a long-term downward spiral. So simply going through this with someone who who needs to understand your health is actually really useful, because it's full of creating a way forward. So that old can't panic, that you've given up on life because you said can't, isn't triggered, because it's all about constructively finding a way forward. It gives you a chance to discuss the different your different management techniques, and they may even think up of like potential workarounds that you hadn't thought of, and it becomes much more of a collaborative thing rather than you saying no all the time, because that no, without all the insight into what's going on in your head, that no sounds like a knee-jerk panic reaction that they're going to push back on. And like in the actions example, the effect is to try and push you harder rather than accept your can't. So in very quick conclusion, people are not psychic. So find your one key point, make that point in a way that works for you and the other person, whether that's words, pictures, actions, decision processes. And don't constantly hide your symptoms and your strategies if you want people to understand them. We have to let people in on these and have realistic expectations underlying all of this, a little bit more understanding and acceptance than yesterday. That will help you build that big picture of complete support. Thank you very much for listening. Those are some of the social media details for myself and for the HMSA. So feel free to note them down. And if you have any questions, which I'm guessing you have because Lisa has appeared on my screen.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much, Hannah. That was really, really interesting. I don't know, I haven't got any questions directly to me. I don't know if they've come through to the link fairy, but what I was going to say was, if it's questions, thoughts, scenarios about, things that you've struggled with, pop those in too, because I think it's a really useful place to share all of these information, and it's just a good place to kind of know that there are people here who understand. I mean, I think when you were talking about the using visual cues, I know that that's really useful with children in schools. I was talking to a parent the other day, so that rather than the kid, having to draw attention to themselves, it was a primary school age kid, they can put something on the desk, and then the teacher knows that they're struggling a bit, but they haven't had to put their hand up. They haven't, and that's a really, I think, good way of doing stuff in a setting when someone might feel a bit nervous about, vocalizing their current energy levels. So there's a question here from Amy, which is a really good question. What can you do when your no is ignored, and especially from services meant to help? Do we need to reiterate the harm caused by ignoring the no?
This is a good one, and essentially this is kind of the communicating can't. So it would be sticking to that one key point. I cannot do this because my answer is no, because, and then keeping it really factual. I tend to, that kind of scenario, it is extremely emotional, and start adding, oh, this makes me feel like you're not listening, like I'm not valued, and all that kind of comment. And although it is valid, it doesn't actually help communicate the key point in that scenario. So just keeping saying, if I do that, then this is the consequences, and try the different phrases. And if at all possible, put in a positive way forward. So if you help me in, I can't do it like that, but if we do it this way, that would work for me. And I think that trying to, it's not always possible, but trying to create that way forward is, can sometimes, not always, some people cannot process it. I don't know how to deal with them yet. I will let you know when, if I ever find out. But giving that way forward, especially in what I call corporate situations, when you're dealing with someone from social services or NHS, or someone where they've got corporate backing and policies and whatnot, then often aren't very used to problem solving. They rely on, no, this is what's done. So if we can solve the problem, if we can say, I can't do it like that because this, can we please do it this way because that will work? Yeah, that's
Yeah, no, I
the thing
think
to
that's
try.
really good advice. And it very much depends on what the no is about. But I know often the advice given in the Ask the OT session. So say it's in a medical appointment and you've asked for, it's slightly different, asked for a referral, or if it's for social services and you've asked for something specific in terms of support. One thing you can do when they say no, say, fine, can you document that, please? Can you document that I have made that request and you've declined that request? Which is not probably the first way to go, but I think it very dependent on the scenario, isn't it? But it can sometimes work in those medical appointment scenarios. Excellent question here as well. Oh, sorry, the chat has just jumped. Just 2 seconds. Any tips for dealing with co-workers who refuse to believe you're ill and think it's all for attention?
Heavily filtered initial response. So I think some of the, because there is that strong element of people aren't psychic, and the more vulnerable we feel, the more we mask. If we're not safe to show our symptoms, we don't show them, therefore people can't see them, and it creates a vicious spiral. Now, it will very much depend on the specific circumstances, but I would say if you've got some safe people that you can practice unmasking with, dropping your guard down, practicing little phrases that communicate accurately how you are, showing your coping strategies in a very casual way. Because if you're very casual about it, it's very hard for them to say, oh, you're just in it for the attention. Because if you've just gone, oh, excuse me while I put my headphones in because it's too noisy. And then you put your headphones in and You haven't attracted any attention, really, have you? So, but you have been, for want of a better way of putting it, you have been disabled in reality in a way that they can see. So so trying that kind of thing, and also looking, is there one key point, one thing that would be a step in the right direction? If they just understood whether it's one particular joint can be particularly painful and cause a particular issue, that means a particular work task is hard, would getting them to understand that one thing is real, and aim for just the one thing at a time, because you won't, when someone's in that mindset, you won't turn around overnight. But I do know have people in my personal life who back along did think it was attention seeking, and I had psychological issues even after I was fully diagnosed. And now they are absolutely acceptant of the fact that I am multiply disabled and need to do things differently. So, yeah, was that at all helpful? It's really not an easy scenario. There isn't a simple.
Absolutely. No, it's very, very, very difficult. It can be difficult, and I'm sure we've all found that to be the case at some point. Another question, which is quite broad, who do you think would be good to approach for problem solving if you're trying to find the positive way forward? Where would, if you know, if you can't find that within oneself?
It's definitely a learned skill. It's very few people who are born with that innately. I would say first port of call would be any loved ones, whether it's family members, close friends. They don't have to be in person, like friends who come around for coffee. They can be online friends. Are a good starting point, even if it doesn't even have to be someone who understands everything, but someone you can talk things through with. Another really useful place is any support groups, because people who've lived it are often full of random solutions. You see that all the time, the HMSA's ones. Another place to go is occupational therapy. So a private occupational therapist, an OT, their job is finding practical solutions to disability related stuff. So someone like Jo Southall, who does a lot with the HMSA, and actually she does online regular free sessions with the HMSA. So an OT would be the healthcare professional who is probably best placed to have that kind of discussion, but you may find a few social places that will also help you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do always feel if there's a very specific thing that you're looking for problem solving with, absolutely put it as one of the questions for the Ask the OT sessions. The
and also
beyond, our social media or whatever.
I was going to say also, if you pop them, if you have wanting a practical solution for something that's hypermobility related, you can message any of our social media and say, could you ask this on the page? And then we'll ask it. If the social media team know some answers themselves, they'll share them. And of course, then you get all the community answers as well. So those can be quite effective.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thank you. Really interesting comment from Louise. She said, really helpful, so clear. Thank you. On a thought or gripe about the emotional labour that we need to do for other people and healthcare professionals, are you ever invited to run similar presentations for professional groups? Because I think this would be so helpful.
Occasionally, there are a few enlightened people out there who want me to talk. I'm actually doing a talk for some people at Guy's. Is it Guy's and Thomas's in London in January? And I have done a few talks for one of the universities for their OT students as well. So I have a slightly different talk for healthcare professionals that involves a lot of don't be a twit, Said very politely and insightfully, of course.
And I think you did that for us a couple of years ago, actually, for professionals. And actually,
but my professional talk can be anything from half an hour to 3 hours, depending on how much they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine's asked, do you have any tips for when people say you look better? It usually comes with an assumption that you are back to normal or capable of much more than previously, often when you aren't.
Yes. So this is one of the scenarios where I suspect my approach might be quite autistic. So I definitely have some autistic traits. So I actually treat those with people listen to what we say more when they feel we have respected and appreciated them. So I start off by saying, oh, well, thank you. And then I say, I actually feel like whatever the truth is, or actually really totally off my head with fatigue today, but I'm here and that's good. So I haven't contradicted their compliment. I thank them for it. So they haven't got any, so that reduces the chance of them getting uppity and then not listening. And then it all turns into a kind of negative thing. I've been thankful for the compliment, but I've also been very clear, actually, this is where I am. And then leave it at that. So no further discussion usually. They can respond however they want to that comment, because generally speaking, their response to my comment about how I'm actually feeling is probably before they've actually processed what I've said. So they're going to need time to process, oh my word, she looks like that, and that's how she feels. So their response to my comment is often, oh no, I'm sure it's not that bad. Yeah, okay, just leave it. They'll learn. It's fine. But just giving them, so it's appreciate the compliment and then give them a little nugget of truth, but don't expect them to understand it right away. It's going to take time for them to accept that that is the reality. The beauty of that technique is people do learn over time. So I've got a bunch of friends who can say I look brilliant, and I can say I feel like crap, and it's like, okay then, and everything carries on, and they just know not to expect much of me. And they might offer me an extra piece of chocolate cake.
Yeah, no, that, and actually someone's put in the chat that they've got a head, so their skin's glow, so they look in quotes healthy even when they're not. So then it's really hurtful when other people say that you look good, because it kind of negates the hidden struggle within. So yeah, which absolutely ties into what you're
and I get similar, oh, you look so young and healthy, and I'm like, oh my word, I've been in bed till half an hour ago because I could not stand, and I really don't want to be here, but I am, because I also want to be here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And someone else has said about how, picking up on what you said earlier, that they mask, that hugely, they smile and they didn't react when, someone says, oh, you're looking good, but they froze. And I think that's a really good point, that however far along we are in the journey, it can still take us by surprise, can't it?
It can. So, it really can.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of practice. I'm very lucky in that I've got some very close extended family members who have health issues and are very similar in personality to me. So we are complete safe space for each other, and we can practice our phrases and practice being open and whatever about our health and how we are. And in doing that, we then improve our ability to say those things to other people because we've practiced the phrases and built the confidence, because it's a very demanding, challenging, scary thing to be that vulnerable, to say, yeah, thanks for the compliment, but actually this is my reality. So I certainly had to build up to it, of starting with safe people, then moving on to nearly safe people. and then
Yeah, no, that's
and then now I can do it to, I can do my drop my mask to a bunch of medical people who go, oh my word, this is weird. Didn't know this could happen.
yeah, no, I think that's absolutely absolutely true. And I think the irony is as well sometimes that one is so fatigued that one doesn't have the energy to go through that process, which kind of comes back to Louise's point about the emotional energy that we expend. And I think
and actually that's where my keyring cards came from, because then they explain in those those moments, this is how I actually feel, this is what's going on with me, without any risk of them taking it like, well, with minimal risk of them taking it personally, because it can't be personal to them if you carry a card with it on. And it takes away a lot of that emotional labor of how on earth do I say this in a way that isn't going to offend them, but is going to get the message across, isn't going to upset them, isn't going to push them into denial. So yeah, that's actually where a lot of our stick man communications cards and stuff comes from.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I think we have come to the end of the comments and the questions. Oh, someone's just said it's hard to be honest with people as I don't want to feel like always moaning. So sometimes it's just easier to mask as there's always some pain or fatigue or symptom going on. And I'm sure we can all relate to that. I think that's,
And masking is part of life. If I never was like, okay, I'm going to get on and do this, I wouldn't be able to get anything done. So it's not that masking is always negative, but we do need to have those moments where we communicate key points. And in a way, oh yeah, I've got bits of pain, that may not actually be a key point. If it's within my normal levels, maybe the key point is this one thing's a bit much for me today. Can we do it like this instead, or can we leave it till tomorrow? So maybe that's a key part of the people we're with all the time. We can't keep telling them this is my symptom level, but also maybe having a traffic light type system, whether it's something bought off the shelf or something you agree with your family. If I wear this t-shirt, it means it's a rough day. If I've got my hoodie on it right up over my head, it means my pain levels are really high.
No, absolutely. No,
some of those things, because those avoid the need for all those conversations that just become a constant stream of complaints, even though they're not. That can be how they're interpreted. So that having a visual thing instead can get the message across, but in a much more effective way in that kind of scenario.
No, that's really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Hannah. There are lots of lovely comments in the chat. I would just ask one favour. The Link Fairy has put a feedback form in the chat. It's massively helpful for us if you can fill in the feedback form. It literally will take you about 20 seconds, but it really helps us to know what's working, what's not working, and what we can plan for future sessions. So that would be absolutely fantastic if you could do that before you go. We'd be very, very grateful. But thank you so much to Hannah. Thank you to everyone for coming and to and also for sharing as well, because I think that's been a really important part of this session. And we hope to see you all again very, very soon. So thank you so much, Hannah, and to everyone for coming. See you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.